Welcome to another episode of the Carry Trainer Higher Line podcast. Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Higher Line podcast, brought to you today by Gunfighter Gun Oil and Armored Coffee. We've got a friend of ours on here, Tony Cowden. Tony, the name of your company is?
Capable Incorporated.
I thought so. I didn't want to butcher it. I thought that's what it was.
Yeah.
You are former soft guy, endurance athlete, competitive shooter, looks like a hunter, and possibly a seamstress with the sewing machine behind you.
That is the girlfriend's, and some people would say that's kind of stereotypical, being her Asian, Japanese lineage. But yeah, it is stereotypical.
That's funny. So what do you sew? Like, what are you sewing back there?
No, she's always sewing something, man. She like tailors all her own clothes, and
oh, that's cool.
Yeah. She'll tailor some of my stuff every now and then. She put a zipper in a wool shirt the other day to make it a jacket. Some Canis hunting pants. She turned them into shorts for me, man. So
nice.
Her mom's really old school, and old school Japanese, and taught her all that stuff growing up. So it's kind of cool that she can do that stuff.
That's kind of a lost art.
Man, I'm probably just going to put that needle through my hand.
Tell us a little bit about yourself for people listening that don't know who Tony Cowden is or what you're about.
Man, try to do the long short of it all is, pretty misbehaved child. Went to college for a little bit, never actually, like I say, enrolled in college and never attended class. And so the Army kind of became the answer. When the Army wound up going to SFAS, hit selection, got one little trip in to Eastern Europe, came home, 9/11 happened, and I was really lucky because I went in to Special Forces through 19th Group, the Guard. And, a lot of folks still don't even know how kind of an awesome back door that is in the Special Forces, where you can kind of, it gives you two things. It gives you don't necessarily have to go active duty, right? A lot of people think that's not really paying your dues, and that's not a completely wrong argument. And then the other thing is, like, if you don't make selection, you can go back to being a civilian. So you kind of have an out. And I tell guys that. At the time, I had no clue what I was doing, man. I met a guy in college who was a third group guy, and he told me about it, and I was like, yeah, that should be awesome. I watched Rambo when I was a kid, and so 9/11 happened, man. I was really lucky. The project I was working on, I was working for 5th Group. So I got to stay with 5th Group. And I originally went right over in the initial push, was able to get right into Afghanistan. So kind of like just got really lucky early on in my career. And so Afghanistan happened. I actually got handed off to 19th Group and 3rd Group from 5th Group. So I kind of almost did 2 tours back to back without getting to go home. But it gave me a lot of experience very early in my career. And I also got a lot of people that helped me out a little later in my career. And then, so on my next trip, 2 trips later, we did Iraq. 2 trips later, I broke my back. And I thought my Army career was done. I actually thought I was done.
What happened? How did you break your back?
Walked off a cliff. And I had a pretty heavy back on.
Dark out, I'm assuming?
Dark, cold, trying to wear night vision. And just, back then, night vision really wasn't awesome by any means. And, was a little disorientated, a little tired, all that kind of stuff. And literally just walked right off some rocks. And without that depth, it all looked the same. I couldn't see anything, really. It was just cold, dark, sleeting, icy rain, whatever you want to call it. It was bad,
How far did you fall, do you know?
About 15 feet.
Okay.
And, rucksack and gear just kind of just crushed me, buckled me right over. I pretty much landed with my feet out in front, and rucksack just crushed me, bent me over, smashed my L5 vertebrae, cracked it, cut my.
Wow.
And docs didn't think I was going to walk again. At least, I think their prognosis was when you get out of the brace and you do your rehab, because I was in that whole brace thing, traction brace. And they were like, if when you ever walk again, you'll probably always need a cane. And I was like, all right, maybe crutches. Okay, cool. Well, within just a few months, while I was still in a lot of pain, right, that whole I can't feel my legs thing, that was not me. I could feel it 110%. And it was a really painful time. And when that kind of nerve pain, it's not just local to where you're at. It was my entire right leg, my groin, my junk. I mean, just all of it. Imagine just perpetually walking around for numerous weeks, months at a time, feeling like someone had just kicked you right in the junk.
That sucks.
Yeah, just that gut hurt feeling, digestive issues, things like that, you know, because everything below that L5, you know, was affected. You know, foot, ankle didn't work very well, that kind of thing. Well, I was lucky. I was blessed, you know, whatever you want to call it. I got healthy very quick. But I was also lucky that during that rehab, I met a guy that was very much into powerlifting. And he basically said, hey, man, I know these doctors are telling you this and that, and you got to be careful what you lift. He's like, but the reality is the body responds to stress. So let's put a little bit of weight on it. And I remember trying to pick up 95 pounds, you know, a barbell with 225s on it from like mid quad high, and it being the most painful thing I had ever done. Well, got healthy. And I wound up going to work for initially the State Department and then over to the OGA, or the intelligence agency. And back to the guys I met in Afghanistan, some of the paramilitary guys. You know, I was able to get my foot in the door over there. And since then, man, I've been, you know, working on various projects and things like that. I did in 2007, out of a place of just wanting to work out, I started CrossFit Wilmington down in Wilmington, North Carolina. And it was kind of a side job or whatever, you know, for me and the other contractors and military guys in the area to work out. That kind of grew pretty big, and sold that off. And at sometime in 2012, I actually rejoined the National Guard with the idea that I would try to help the next generation of guys. And so now I still belong to 20th Special Forces Group, and I'm assigned to the ASD, the Advanced Skills Detachment at headquarters. And we do SFOUT, or the CQB course, SOTIC, the level 2 sniper course. We supplement dive operations, halo operations, off-road operations, all that kind of stuff. In theory, an ASD is where, you know, guys can go, they get assigned there, and then they help train the other teams. That's the idea of it.
So like a lot of you dudes that did a bunch of time, you're paying it back, passing on that training to
Trying to.
dudes. Yeah.
Very much. The reality is right now, most of the combat experience got out of the military. So we have entire special operations team, entire special forces teams with no combat experience.
Kind of back to how it was pre 9/11.
Right. And I mean, let's face it, man, you know, the military in a lot of ways is starting to very much look like post-Vietnam era. And anybody knows anything about the 70s in the United States military, it was a bad time. And
talk about that a little bit.
You know, I mean, of course, we the social status of the United States was much different.
Mm-hmm.
60s and the 70s, and you know, the military was very not appreciated. I was going to say underappreciated. So, and we've all heard the stories about, you know, people spitting on guys when they came home.
Right. Baby killer.
Right. You know, of course, we didn't see that as much. I don't think our generation, our war generation, experienced that. We actually saw lots of people trying to help vets and all that kind of stuff. And the military actually, in the VA, leadership at least trying to revamp that stuff and make sure that when guys got home that they were taken care of. To some successes and to some degrees not so successful. So for me, I was like, hey, I'm probably never going to change the VA. I'm not going to start a nonprofit to raise money to help guys. So to me, I just tried to help more interpersonal. So like in 20th group, teaching the courses, and like at the gym, I would offer, you know, I had free memberships at the gym to anybody who had ever seen combat. You didn't have to be a combat MOS, but did you go and see it? You know, were you a truck driver that got ambushed? You know, so I tried to do it on my level, you know, and
makes sense.
That's just, I'm still, even with all this interaction on social media and stuff, man, I'm still I like face-to-face communication, man, you know? And so anyway, that's kind of been my motivation since that stuff. I still do contracts and I still do the real job. And of course, you'll never see that on social media. But, you know, in between those gigs, and those trips have gotten less and less as the war's gotten smaller and smaller. Every place has gotten smaller and smaller. So I'm only doing 1 or 2 trips a year now. They're not very long. And it's given me much more time to do more of that interpersonal and face-to-face stuff with guys.
Mm-hmm.
From everything to like wounded warrior hunts. A lot of times I'm offered wounded warrior hunts because I had not just a broken back. I got a really bad TBI from an IED that one almost got me. And the recovery from that made recovering from a broken back hell in comparison. So sometimes I'm offered these spots in these wounded warrior hunts. And my thing is always like, hey, there's somebody else out there that needs it more than me. For the most part, I'm functional. You know, I have good days, I have bad days. And most people can't tell the difference when they're around me. And so for me, I don't want to take those spots from guys. So what I'll do is volunteer to help guide those guys. You know what I mean?
Oh,
so
cool.
like hunts that I got, you can see both those fellows on the wall back there. It came out of one hunt where I actually, for the first 4 days of the hunt, just guided a couple of Force Recon Bubbas who could barely walk. I helped them hunt down a red stag and a nail guy down in Texas. And because
Cool.
of that, I was able, you know, they were like, oh, we really appreciate it. I was able to go and harvest my own animals too, you know? So it comes around, man. Doing nice things, you know, it ultimately comes around. And, you know, in that hunt, man, I watched a guy that was very addicted to Oxy. Within 4 days of that hunt, the last 2 days, he stopped, you know, because I had very serious conversations with him. I was like, look here, Marine, you need to take your jarhead ass and get off these narcotics. I know it's going to hurt. It's going to hurt. He needed somebody to talk to him like an NCO, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And like, tomorrow we're going on this hunt. You're not taking nothing. Like, you're not carrying a high-powered rifle. Hi. We're not doing it.
Yeah.
He's like, roger that, you know, raw. So anyway, in his case, man, very, very cool. The dude hasn't touched narcotics since, man. It was like 5 years later. You know, he's back.
That's awesome.
You're right, he's taking care of his family and kids, which is what I taught to him. I was like, hey, man, the new mission is take care of your family. The old mission was reconnaissance, surveillance, Marine Corps stuff. The new mission is take care of your kid, man. And I just think no one had just talked to him like that since, you know, they were coddling him and stuff like that and giving him drugs to keep, you know, just keep him sedated. So anyway, that's a kind of cool story, man. I know I digressed a little bit.
I like that stuff. I think a lot of times we get mired in thinking like we got to do big things, not realizing that little things are big things.
All right. You know,
He's got some kids that now are going to have a better experience with a father than otherwise. That's the ripple.
Yeah. I was talking to him just, he had his 5-year-old son out shooting a bow.
That's cool.
You know, good stuff. And let's face it, if every single one of us, how many ever billions of people are on this planet, once a week did something nice for somebody else, I think that would be some serious second, third order effects around.
I agree.
I'm not a realistic person. You know what I mean? I'm not that guy that lives in the clouds of like, if we were all just kind, it would be a better place. The reality is not everybody's kind. I mean, clearly.
No, but as we see now, we are attracted just like the ancients were to violence and train wrecks. We still do it now. Social media and the internet is populated with this stuff, and it's all we see, or it's all most people see. So they choose to see the world through that optic of evil, bad. They don't hear the story like you just told. They don't see the person giving the shirt off their back, or like you said, just being kind. Just it's a big deal.
I mean, I run into it here and there, right? Like, you know, a little old school, and I still talk to people and young men like they're my young rangers or whatever, you know, and I'm like, hey, or, you know, come here, retard. And I even talk like that on social media. And some of the young guys, I've gotten a lot of pushback from talking like that to people. And I'm like, hey, man, I'm not being a butthole. Like, if you ask me something nicely, right, you're going to get a nice, thoughtful answer, no matter what level of a question it is. You know, I answer a lot of very beginner questions. But if some young little smart ass, for lack of a better term, comes at me from that position, he's going to get what he gives.
Just to clarify for the viewers, listeners, I think what you're talking about, because not everybody interacts in that world. Maybe somebody's commenting about some pistol mechanics that you're displaying, and they're sounding off with their ignorant approach,
Right.
or less than knowledgeable thought about it. You're like, hey, let me tell you something.
Yeah, and my thing is, hey, if you're better than me, I'm automatically going to pay attention. I will shut my mouth and pay attention. I don't care if you're older than me, higher ranked than me, or 10 years old. If you're better than me, I'm going to pay attention. I want to know what you're doing. So the world, USPSA national champion last year, man, Christian Seiler. He's coming to my range in a few weeks, man.
Cool.
He's a youngin'. I mean, he's a young, very young man. I want to know what he sees, how he does it. I want to hear it from him.
Yeah.
But when somebody is just regurgitating something from some other someone they heard, who a lot of times I know where it's coming from, and maybe that person is truly less experienced than I am, then I'm probably going to dismiss it. And if they're nice about it, I'll explain through it. If they're going to be a little smart ass, they're probably not going to get much out of me. You know what I mean? Like,
sure. I've literally seen people recite material I put out 5-6 years ago, recite it almost verbatim, but in the wrong context. Like, hey, what you wrote is logical because I actually said it myself, but you're attaching it to the wrong thing. So like nice try. Yeah.
Oh, man, techniques and tactics. And that's why I try really hard. I stay away from techniques, tactics. Guys will send me DMs and ask me about, hey, man, what do you think we should do in this situation in CQB? And I'm like, whoa, I'm not going to even touch CQB over the phone. There are too many dynamics. I can't give you the answer. The most important component in any gunfighting situation, whether it's one-on-one, in a mugging situation at an ATM or a full-on troop level assault, the number one most important variable in that equation is the bad guy. They tell us everything to do. So if someone, what his SWAT team team should do in a situation, man, that's irresponsible of me. My answer is always, hey, where are you guys at? If I can come to you, we'll do some CQB together. Let's do that. Otherwise, I have to take that more responsible approach and be like, hey, man, I can't really talk about that here. I don't have the context.
Right. Situation dictates tactics and procedures, right?
For sure.
That's become a kind of a fun use of footage these days. Look what happened in this shooting or in this excerpt of violence. Like, what would you do? I don't know. I never would see it from 12 feet in the air with a 200-degree camera angle. I'd never see it where everything's in focus. I never would have been in that position to even be able to analyze it. Yeah.
If I post a video like that, or even just a training video from the catwalk, and things go down, and I just post it to Instagram and say, okay, so you can all see what went wrong here. Thoughts? ? What I'm going to get is a lot of comments. I'm going to get a lot of thoughts from a lot of varying experience level people, from maybe some almost experts, because the true experts, they're not getting suckered in.
I was about to comment. I just wrote something the other day. Anybody I know that's truly an expert or a badass doesn't engage in any of those conversations. They don't have time to, or it's just meaningless drivel. Right,
because in an AAR on site, the first thing I'm going to ask is the guys on the ground, the guy who was involved, the force on force, or, I want to know, hey, what did you see and why did you do it? I'm not going to start right out with, hey, you screwed up. Walk me through what just happened so I can better understand why you executed it the way you did. And maybe he just says, man, I got lost in the sauce and effed up. Hey, right, trooper, let's do it again. But, when we're just doing comment bait, and that's what that is to me, yeah, man, I'm not getting into that. I'll watch those, like, executive protection lifestyle. One of those guys, man, he posts lots of real life videos from around the world. I don't know where he gets all that CCT footage, but there's some pretty amazing videos, and I'll watch the videos because it's interesting to watch real life go down and watch people's reactions, but I don't read the comments, and I definitely don't.
Yeah, I'm not saying there's not information to be gleaned. That's why you view it. But I think when people base tactics or training on this is what happened, so now we'll do this, I always have thought a lot of times we as a people are basing choices on untrained people's actions. So like, well, just because that worked for Bob at the ATM doesn't mean you should do it. Bob got lucky, or Bob was a dumb or whatever it was. Yeah.
Well, we hear it all the time, right? We need to train, we need to train, we need to train. And I always talk about the synthetic, unbiased approach. No emotion. I just want to analyze things. So I can, any argument I want to win, I can find a study, or I can probably find a video on the internet to support my claim. So clearly I'm a proponent of training and being prepared.
Sure.
Or I can find thousands of CCT videos of convenience store clerks who have never shot a gun before, who when faced with that situation reached under the counter, pulled out a .38 and sent 3 or 5 rounds and won a gunfight. That is counter to everything we pretty much know, not just think or believe, right? We know we need training. And then we can also take it to the next level. Law enforcement. Most law enforcement do not get a very high level of training. Right? Not digging on law enforcement because law dogs know it. Right? Every conversation, they don't get much training. They train to a call. But the reality is, statistically speaking, the numbers prove it that untrained or not highly trained law enforcement survive most gunfights. And in many cases, they win them through survival, right? They may not super dominate them, So the question begs us, what is the variable in that equation that is allowing the unprepared to survive? And a lot of times the best thing I can come up with is their enemy or their opponent was not dedicated to their cause.
I think that's a good observation.
Because the flip side is when we watch videos of violence, when the perpetrator, the bad guy, intended on violence, right? Dude walks in, pulls his gun out, shoots the convenience store clerk, and then opens the cash drawer himself. That convenience store clerk, in those cases, typically loses. When that guy sitting behind the wheel in that traffic stop has already pulled that gun out, his hands on the gun, he's made the decision.
I'm not going back to jail.
Right. Even though he's in a bad position, he's in the vehicle, he's in an awkward shooting position. Those are the ones where he's already dedicated to his cause. Right? There's an officer-involved shooting and officer fights where the perp isn't certain he's not going back to jail. And he makes that decision at some point during the altercation. And maybe it's because the police officer has clearly got his guard down or something like that. Whatever reason, during the interaction, the bad guy says, you know what? This is my opportunity. That's different than the bad guy who was committed. In a SWAT team environment, SWAT kicks down the door, they'll all tell you. In most cases, they get this.
Yep.
Right? They're serving a warrant, a felony warrant. And the felon wasn't quite committed to losing his life. All right, I'll go back to jail. I'll go spend another year, 18 months in jail. I'll be back. Cool. That's different, man. It's the dudes who are like, I ain't going back to jail. It ain't happening. They see SWAT coming across the yard. When the SWAT gets ready to breach, shots come through the door of the wall. That's all we win.
We've lost deputies here in our county from that.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Yeah, so I think the enemy, man, I always go back to that, right? Like, hey, what would you do in X situation? Wait. Tell me more about my bad guy. What's he doing? you know?
Well, I think what you're describing is the same way we should approach business or fitness or diet. Like, and of course, the
Absolutely.
business opponents are not somebody you're going to shoot, but it's the same thing. What's
We have
their, yeah, what do they
target goals.
have? What, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, target goals.
Yeah,
Goals.
yeah. Which is, I think, when you sit and watch that footage, it's that is just constantly moving because you're training for a million possible scenarios, which is why you see guys that end up doing like the pocket dumps, and I've got 13 tourniquets, 6 pocket knives, 4 flashlights, 8 magazines, 4 guns, 2
Right.
medical kits around each ankle because I could need it all.
I might have to go up against, platoon size element in my route on my way to Starbucks.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Well, and here's the opposite of that. It's very anecdotal. The guys I know who are the most experienced dudes, they carry a Glock 43. They got a pocket knife they ain't sharpened in a while, and they wear flip-flops.
Dude, I was about to say the same thing. Like, I got a buddy, Z. I comment about Z a lot. He's a 5th group guy, and Z's a BJJ black belt, and 20-year almost 5th group assaulter, and flip-flops, 19. I mean, I don't want to tell all the dudes private life, but he works with us a lot. But because he knows I'm going to pay attention and not get caught unaware and not get stuck in a position where I've got no reaction gap, where I've got no distance and time.
And if you don't have experiences, you can't have perceptions, right? You don't have takeaways. You don't have lessons learned. So I call a lot of the gear that a lot of guys go, and I think this is why I bump heads with so many guys. They think I'm insulting them. I think I'm funny.
Yeah, you're not funny.
I think I'm funny.
I'm just joking.
It doesn't matter.
That was me being funny.
It doesn't matter if you think I'm funny. I think I'm funny.
So that was one of my notes that I had, was that like you're outspoken, and I kind of am too. We come from completely different backgrounds, but when I started posting things on social media, like my goal was to take a hatchet and just chop sacred cows up, and guys would get angry at me. And yeah. I think, well, are you mad at me or are you mad at the idea?
Yeah, you have your way. And you know what? I think with some of the younger guys especially, man, I get called a boomer sometimes. Clearly, I'm not old enough to be a boomer. I've seen things over since 1997, and I've seen the way it changed. And I was also involved in some of the combat that taught us to stop what we're doing. Many of the lessons learned in Mogadishu did prove to be completely wrong for Iraq.
Mm-hmm.
And it would be different in a different city in Iraq, fighting different guys with different training backgrounds. So that's why I come to the fact that there's no one way to do something.
Adaptability.
Have your way, and you are telling me it is awesome. And I say, okay, let's test it. The best we're going to be able to do is force on force. If it's a shooting technique, let's put it on the timer and put it on paper. Let's test it. And I think in the civilian world, budgets don't support testing. Where I work, we wanted to test something new. We would test it, run every kind of what if scenario. And before we changed something, we tested it. It wasn't a theory, Mm-hmm. I think that's the difference of having experiences and perceptions from those experiences. It's no longer theory, it's experience. And the more guys you work with will tell you they don't have one way. They have lots of different ways to skin any different cat, and they can do it on demand. Mm-hmm. Well, here's the lesser training.
Say that last part again. You broke up.
The more experienced guys, they have a lot of experiences. Well, they also have a lot of training to have many different tools in their toolbox human performance, human capability wise. Like buddy from 5th group, black belt and BJJ, he could be stark ass naked. He's got capabilities. And from capabilities, he has confidence, which is not arrogance, right? He's confident. He can also, because of his experiences overseas and in real fights, he can do a valid threat and a vulnerability assessment when he's bebopping around America, which is still pretty darn safe, right? He can say, okay, what is my threat going to the grocery store today? Well, I probably only need a Glock 43, or maybe I don't need anything, because my situational awareness will keep me out of trouble. I'm not looking for a fight. So the more experienced a guy is, the more capable he is with less. You know? Human performance becomes the thing. But that's the paradox. It's an invert relationship. The more experience you have, the more confidence you have. The less experience you have, you have a lot of unknowns. So you try to prepare for these what ifs and these unknowns. And for me, I'm okay in cut off multicams, flip flops, a tank top, you know, and a gun in my truck when I go into a store. I'm okay with that. Whereas some guys need a high capacity, you know, 19 or bigger, an extra mag, 2 knives, you know, a pocket knife, a fixed blade, and again, you know, a tourniquet and a med kit. And I'm like, hey man, you're not wrong. I cannot tell you you are wrong for doing that, for having those things on you. Because if you need them and you don't have them, well, and I realize, and it's based on my threat and vulnerabilities assessments, that, hey man, I don't need that stuff. I don't perceive that I need that stuff in America. And
I think the challenge for a lot of people, I mean, and I'm agreeing with you, is the noise though. It's the noise. You got thousands of people saying, do this, do this, do this, do that, do this, do that. And it's maddening because you can't define what the goal really is. We always tell people, like for us, the goal is live a long, full life. So if you're fat and smoking cigs, and you're concerned about buying ammo, those are not congruent ideas.
That is not sensical. And I think I look with that, right? You know, me and my team, you know, I was always about, you got to be the full package. You have to be in shape. I don't care how great you can shoot or how awesome you can call for fire, how awesome you drive. If you're out of shape, you're not fit, right? You're not physically fit for the demands of the job. Your performance will degrade so quickly under stress and under physical duress and stimuli. So when guys are talking about you need all this stuff, this gear, but they fundamentally dismiss physical fitness, I'm like, you're not the whole package and I'm not listening to you, you know? And also I've tried really hard. My first, same kind of like you said, my first initial interactions on social media was, that's stupid. Well, that appealed to some guys like us. Well, guess what? I don't need to tell a guy who thinks like me how I do things. That's preaching to the choir. So I said, okay, I'm going to change the way I approach this. And all I'm going to do is start talking about what I do and why. Here's what I do and why. I don't think in America you need all that stuff. However, if you do, I might make a little bit of fun of you and pick because I think I'm funny. But I'm not going to slam you for it, right? If you think you need to carry a submachine gun in your backpack to go into Walmart, all right, man, cool. I have no room in my world for a submachine gun. I was present for the transition from the MP5s to the M4s. And I have seen the difference in using a submachine gun and using an M4 on real tissue. So my experience based on that is If I'm carrying a rifle, I want it to have rifle bullets. Now, if you tell me you have a submachine gun as your truck gun, and you loaded it, jammed it up with the hottest 9mm rounds you can, I'm gonna be like, cool, man, good for you. I hope you never need it.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of me saying, this is what I do and I think you should do it, I just say, hey, this is what I do and why. Now you can take that information and do whatever you want with it.
I'm sure you are. I appreciate what your point just was there. I don't disagree. I have gotten to the point, and I don't have the same life experience as you do. I have others, but I've gotten to the point where I refuse to argue. And it's not, I know better than you, because I may not, but I refuse to argue with you. Like I've told people before, tell me where to send the check and I will fly you to the range. I'll fly you to the gym. Not because I want to challenge you, but come show us. You know, like
Show me.
Yeah, come on out. Like there's no time to sit here and type about it. It's like let's do it. Yeah, let's do it.
Let's evaluate your theory.
Mm-hmm.
And here's another dynamic from that we don't get on social media. Myself and John Nettles. All right. John is very experienced.
John's a stud.
Absolutely, right? And John's got 7 more years of experience than I do. I have worked for John. Well, guess what? When John tells me to do something and he's my boss, I do it. Roger that, John. It doesn't even matter if I agree with it wholly. Maybe, he thinks a route from A to B is the best route. But I think we should go a different route. Well, guess what? It doesn't matter anymore because he's the boss. And because I know he's experienced, I trust that I'm going to roll with that. Not a problem. Well, on Instagram, man, me and John could get on Instagram and argue all day long. There's no one there to settle the argument like we have in the military or law enforcement or the workplace. There's always a boss. There's no bosses. There's no mediators on Instagram.
Mm-hmm. A circle jerk that never ends.
Right. And I try to remember that, hey, guys, look, that's why I went back to, hey, man, this is what I do, and this is why I do it. And guess what? There are 10 different situations that would change what I do and why I do it. And it always goes back to what's the environment and what's the bad guy doing.
Mm-hmm.
What are we could get right down to just how I press the trigger, how I work the trigger on a pistol. It differs when the target's point blank, 3 to 5 meters, than when it's 15 meters. It's not one size fits all,
Yeah.
So, the way I drive my F-250 pickup is different than the way I might go drive Melissa's badass little Tesla.
Yeah.
I play with a little bit more in that, in a fast car than I can a big heavy truck. So while the concepts are very similar, the techniques vary.
Yeah.
So
that makes sense. I think a lot of that has turned, I'm sure you are in communication with people through social media from other countries. People comment or interact. And I've noticed in the last maybe 2 years, just because this has exploded, people that listen to this podcast or know our channel have heard this before, but 10 years ago, 15 years ago, none of this information was known unless you were a part of an IPSC club or had been to a place like Shaw's or Rogers Shooting School or Gun Sight. There was only a handful of places proliferating this information, which has still evolved tons in the last 5 years, 10 years.
Right.
But it's an interesting thing that you can just open up a weird social media app and for free interact with guys like JJ Racaza or Max Michel and watch. I remember learning to shoot a pistol when I was a kid, and how do I hold it? Well, I don't know. What does TJ Hooker do? Or what is, what I mean? Like, what do you see on TV? Because there was nobody that knew anything unless you showed up at one of the leather slap competitions out in the desert and watch what the dudes were doing, like Robbie Latham or one of those guys. It just now it's just everywhere.
And the culture, you know, where I work was always bring in the subject matter experts, right? So a lot of the better funded units bring in JJ or go all the way back to Latham and Barn. And even in the last 3 to 5 years, my pistol shooting has changed exponentially, and it's improved exponentially because I shot with Brandon Wright and JJ and these pro shooters. And it was a lot of the same concepts articulated differently from the competitive shooter's point of view. Well, I already kind of knew, right? If I want to learn to drive better, I go to a racetrack, get in the car with a car driver. Well, when I realized that, wow, man, as a tactical shooter, I might have been pretty good in the tactical shooting world. The average special operations guy, across the board, the average guy, is not an awesome shooter.
Yeah, it's not their job.
Because, yeah, their job entails so many more things. And even the pistol, right? Like, I've been on many, many operations where I didn't carry a pistol. And we see a lot of people, they spend a lot of time working on transitions. And I'm like, I went on missions where I didn't even carry a pistol, you know, and that's
on that. Let me ask you real quick. I've asked every SF, every SEAL, every Ranger I've ever met, how many times did you ever transition to a pistol from a long gun or see it done in a real scenario?
Yeah, right. Me personally,
have you
0
ever see it done?
I have seen it done, and I have friends that have done it.
Okay.
A SEAL friend of mine on the initial invasion of Iraq, I made a video about this, and it got a lot of weird feedback from guys. And I don't think guys realized that it was based off of something that really happened to a real person in real combat. It's sad that we have to actually preface everything we say with the word real. So anyway, good friend of mine goes into a room and he takes a round through his M4. Catastrophic failure.
Guns down.
Transitions to his 226. Gets one round out and has a failure. Well, in that time period, he was already on top of the guy. Went hand to hand. Goes to the ground. And he was the number 1 man, so he's deep in the room. His teammate, he was only 2-person clear, had no shot, no angle. He was still dealing with his priorities of work on his side of the room. So this fellow goes to the ground and commences to using his pistol as a blunt object. And in a lull, he goes to clear the double feed. He pulls the mag out, locks slide to the rear, pulls the mag out, and the guy still needed a little love. So he continued to eliminate the threat with a 226 and a magazine. And he
just bam, bam.
Right. And I was talking about that. That's the mindset. You have to be prepared to do anything it takes to win, that there are no rules.
Our buddy Joel likes to say resourcefulness is your best resource.
Absolutely. Yeah, Joel's all over it, man. So anyway.
So wait, you made a video describing what you just described?
Yeah. And I even
said you just sat at the camera like you're doing now and told the story.
Right. Well,
okay.
I didn't really, I had a dummy and I was shooting some close contact stuff, and I even said, if I got to pull this mag out and jam it in the dude's eye socket, then I'm gonna do that.
And what was the pushback? Like, you should have tap racked and
right. The pushback was like, I mean, I even got things like, you could damage your magazine. And I was like, what? What are you talking about? At this
here lies Tony Cowden. He died in combat, but his magazine was okay.
Right.
That's so stupid.
And so because of situations like that, right, and again, experiences, very few people have had experiences where they've got to do force on force at full speed and full contact. Most force on force, we're brief, don't hurt the role players.
Mm-hmm.
That's not how we train. We kit up, we foam up the guns, right, full on M4s, and we get at it. Guys get hurt in that type of training because we're going full speed. Not 100%. We're not trying to hurt each other, but you're in the 90s. Dudes get busted up. Yeah. And in fighting, it's win. And it's the closest thing we can get to the real fighting stuff. And very few people get the opportunity to train like that? Well, in our world, became very clear early on in the war that we had to start doing that we had to start putting our hands on the role players. And the role players had to be able to fight back realistically. So guess who became the role players? Us.
Yeah.
Now we're fighting dudes that are equals, you know? And it took the training to the next level. Whereas, I mean, let's face it, in Afghanistan, you go to put your hands on a small Afghani, it's not like fighting 200-pound, soft guy with some training. But if that's who you're fighting, the return on investment is going to be bigger. Mm-hmm. And again, we tried not to hurt each other and stuff, but people don't know that you can strike and use a magazine. And I never posted the video. I took a Glock magazine and I beat a 1x4 almost in half, just chunked it up, right? I should go back and find that video and post it. It was kind of cool. I just used a Glock magazine to destroy a 1x4.
Use it as a bludgeon to protect your hand and pound it over.
The wood was all shattered and messed up. I loaded it back up with ammo, put it in the Glock, and it still worked. And that exceeded any beating I would ever put on a human being with soft tissue, stuff like that. And again, test, evaluate, And again, so what? I have a malfunctioned gun in my hand. If I beat some mofo to death with my magazine, well, I won. Who cares about that magazine? I got another.
Yeah, right? You got to get to the next problem.
And that's another, that leads us to, right, like everybody wants that sub-second draw. And in no time will I ever tell anyone not to train that, because the faster the better. I have had to use my pistol in self-defense. I did a lot of low-profile operations where all I had was a pistol. And in numerous times I had to interact with very bad guys. And in those situations where I did have to pull my pistol, every single situation, every single incident, I had to go hands-on first, right? Because what was the cue to pull my gun? They threatened me with a gun. Well, had I took the time to go for my gun, I would have been dead because they already had their gun out. So I had to get control of that first and foremost. And in every single one of those situations, I had to start throwing hands. And we hear that all the time from some of the younger generation who, for whatever reason, they didn't grow up scrapping in school. I could get in a fist fight in school and I might get detention. No one called the police. These days you get in a fight in school, man, and both guys get arrested.
Yeah.
So, and that's not me beating up on the younger generation. It's just the fact, and it's just the world we live in today. Well, so I hear guys say things like, well, I'm not going to get in silly fist fights. And I'm like, well, if you're not going to get if you're good enough to avoid a silly fist fight, well, you ought to be good enough to avoid a gunfight.
Hell yeah.
You don't need to know how to fist fight, and do a little combatives. Then you probably don't need a gun either. Right. If we're using that rationale, and if Lord knows, I don't want anybody to take that and say, oh, Tony Cowden says people don't need guns. No, absolutely. Carry a gun, but realize it's not a tool you're going to be able to just go to in every situation.
Yeah. Yeah. Your drunk uncle, your drunk uncle, or the neighbor's dog that got out, or whatever the case is. Not everybody deserves to be or should be shot or even have a gun pointed at them.
Yeah. And people that deserve to be shot that you can't legally shoot.
Your comment about going hands-on and fighting for a gun, we've approached this subject many times in Force on Force and talking with different people. And I tell guys that whose response is to have this sub-second draw stroke, which is cool. You and I can do it. But what have I done so wrong that I am left to have a fraction of a second to hang my life in that time frame? Like, what have I done? And I'm not even talking about being like Spider-Man paying attention all the time, but that's what I've left my life that I care so much for, that I've given myself a fraction of 1 second to win or lose? Like that.
And let's face it, to get that sub-second draw from concealed carry, we're in a very controlled environment. We're standing bladed off at the target, hands
Right,
up.
right.
So I don't have a phone in my hand. I'm not carrying groceries, you know. So it's not very realistic.
You're not tired, slumping out of your pickup truck, going to the garage or whatever after a 12-hour shift at the mine.
Exactly. A little hungover from a long night, you know.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, I think that's where guys get a little bit lost on that. And I haven't talked about this. I was going to put up on the internet. If you go back through, well, it was in May. I know it was in May because it happened right before I went out to Minneapolis in June. And I went to the local Family Dollar, right? Out here in the middle of nowhere, we don't have, but we got a Family Dollar and a gas station. I came out of Family Dollar, and I had my milk and my charcoal. And there were 4 young men around my truck. Parking lot was empty. I was the only people there along with them. And they had parked right next to my truck. My truck was backed in because it's a small parking lot. So my truck's facing me, their vehicle's facing away. And 2 of them are behind their vehicle, and 2 of them are between my vehicle and theirs. One of them, the furthest away, is leaned up against my truck like he owns it. These are young guys. And it's Saturday evening. They're prettied up, man. It's clear, man. They're a little hyped up. They're going out, you know. And the other one is tapping on the window of my truck, agitating my dog.
Oh.
My dog has his face crammed through the space in the window and is losing his mind.
What kind of dog?
Little white and black pointer lab mix. And
okay.
He's got a little aggressiveness about him, and he's very protective of his truck.
Makes sense. It's his home.
Well, so clearly, I can't pull my gun out and shoot these guys, right? But I did say, you know, I set my stuff down and was like, hey, what the? I'm wearing flip-flops, a tank top, because I just got done working out, and cut off multicams, what I had worn to work out. Well, I'm not really set up for a good fight, you know? And instead of letting them dictate what's going on, I went to a little quick run over there, and I shoved the guy that was messing with my dog. Because when I yelled at him at first, he kind of just went like this, like, what? You know, like a young dude does. Well, it's my dog, man. And so I shoved him. He kind of piled into the next kid, and we went to throwing some hands. And like I said, in one of the videos, you can see my face is scuffed because he did get me one time in the noggin, right side the eye, you know. And as the other 2 guys came around the vehicle, now I'm kind of scrapping with 2 dudes in between the car. I'm feeling comfortable. I'm happy with that because it's confined space. But now I got 2 dudes coming around the other side. So at that point, I pulled my pistol out. And all I asked them was, what's next? What's next, fellas? And they were like, whoa. So by escalating, I de-escalated it. Because let's face it, man, me against 4 young buck teenagers, I'm probably going to get beat up. And I didn't really want to get. Well, at that point, they got their mess together, they got in the car, and they left. Yes, I pulled my gun out, but I couldn't shoot them.
I got a couple comments on that. What if you hadn't pushed them? What if you just would have said, like, hey, dudes, how about, you know, leave my dog alone?
Absolutely. And you know what? That would have been the better, more mature course of action. Right?
I'm just asking.
No, that is an excellent question. I was going to talk about that because in talking about this story to folks, that is the first thing I go to. It's like, all right, guys, let's talk about what I did. If I had just stood there in the middle of the parking lot and just said, get away from my truck, maybe they would have complied. Maybe. Or maybe all 4 of them would have come at me in the middle of open ground. In between those 2 vehicles gave me some comfort. I could have approached them and got closer in between the 2 vehicles, but I've lost it. To me, all I had in my head was, you know what, close the distance, I didn't strike him. I pushed him, open hands, right? And then the continuum of force, open hand, then closed fists and all that, right? That's basic law enforcement stuff. So realistically speaking, yeah, man, I could have stood there in the middle of the parking lot and asked them nicely, politely, with a little bit of force in my voice to leave my dog and get off my truck, right? Leave my dog alone and get off my truck. And that's correct. That's absolutely correct. And it would be easy for me to say that would have been a better course of action. Well, that's not the choice I made.
Sure.
That's all I got. I made the choice to escalate.
Go ahead.
Yeah,
The need to pull the pistol out. I chuckle when guys say, man, if my gun comes out, I'm pulling the trigger. And that I listen, like what you said is I give that example 1,000 times. If the display of a pistol stops force, then you are now a murderer. Like, well, I pulled it in my procedures that I've ingrained is I'm pulling the trigger. If this sucker comes out of the holster, that's a perfect example. If the dynamic in front of you changes, then you can change and adapt with it, which is why training for always dumping rounds in 0.8 seconds is kind of a foolish thing.
Right. No, man. That was one of the lessons learned early on in the war, that we were entering these structures. We're fighting an unconventional enemy that in many cases we're going to their homes to get them. And their wives and their children are present. And, you know, law enforcement has the saying, never turn your back on family. Even when you respond to a domestic or some dude picking the shit out of his wife, when you go to arrest him, you better not turn your back on her. She might turn on you.
Yeah.
Well, the same goes for us, right? Just because this dude's wife is begging us not to hurt her, we still have to address her. We still have to zip tie her. We still have to put our hands on her. And if she fights us, we're going to have to get a little aggressive. Same with a child, right? A 12-year-old boy can hurt you. They can kill you. Yeah. So you have to treat them that way. So in my mind, when it came time where, okay, me having to do 2 behind me, 2 in front of me, I pull my gun out, stop. They couldn't even get around the car, stop. Everybody stop. Now I put the ball back in their court and they get to make decisions. And that's just how, you know, they got to make the decision. I gave them the choice. Hey, now you clearly see that I'm willing to go to the next level. What are we going to do? They could have responded. Maybe they had a gun. Now we're in a gunfight. They got knives. It could have been my gun versus their knives. But instead, they backed off. They got in their car and left. And all we had was a couple of little scuff marks on us.
Did they or you notify law enforcement?
All right, so I called a friend of mine, sheriff's deputy, and told him what happened. And he was like, all right, man, not a big deal. We'll just see how it plays out. And come to find out, these 4 gentlemen, they are migrant workers. They're Mexican nationals here legally working for my neighbor.
Oh, no. So did you go over and have a chit chat?
Well, so when I was talking to my neighbor about it, and he's a well-known large farmer in this area, a leader in the community around here. I was talking to him and his son about it. And sure enough, a couple days later, it went through the grapevine. And so, yeah, we went over and they even said, you want us to fire them? They would have said, I was like, no. You know what? I'll come over and we'll just make it all up, fix it, and just
take a 6-pack over and put it to bed.
And so it was funny though, because they have like a barracks, a bunkhouse for their workers. So when I pulled up to the bunkhouse with them, the looks on these young men's faces, yeah, right? They thought they were going to lose their jobs, and it's a job they want, clearly. They were going to get sent home. That's not good. Just their families, and you let their families down because the money they make here clearly, goes back to help their families at home. But that's not what we did. We just basically sat down and said, hey, guys, you know what? Around here, you respect people's property, and don't do it again. And I guarantee you those young men learned a great lesson that day, and they're good dudes, they're good guys. I've seen them since,
Would you
live a mile down the street from here.
would you have replayed that same scenario out the same way if you stepped into it again tomorrow, knowing now what you know, knowing now what you didn't know?
Right. Hindsight's always 2020 though, right? It's always 2020.
Mm-hmm.
I can say that, no, I'm going to be me. I'm going to react the way I'm going to react. And the AAR, with hindsight, says maybe I could have played it differently. But if you ask me, would I play it differently? Well, I'll never get another opportunity to consciously make those decisions in the exact situation.
That was what I wanted you to say.
Right.
Because that's the fallacy of having that kind of discussion. Like, you never walk out ignorant to that situation again with those 4 dudes on that night.
It'll never happen again.
Yeah.
Hopefully I will never get in another altercation in the rest of my life, at least on U.S. soil, right? Hopefully. Sure. I'm not into hope, man. All I can say is that based on what I process and perceive in any given situation, I'm going to react a certain way. And I cannot tell you, if you give me a situation, I can give you a theory of how I would act. We're just talking through it. We're talking it.
Mm-hmm.
But I've seen it, right? We've talked to it. Hey, we're getting ready to do this force on force thing. And this is the scenario. And the guys go into it knowing a lot. And then after they do it, we come out and they're like, yeah, I didn't see it going that way at all. I thought I was X, but you know what? I wound up doing Y. Right? And that's the whole training thing. You better have more tools in your toolbox. If you only have a hammer, everything looks like a nail.
Yeah.
And you can't treat everything like a nail.
I think the other good lesson there for anybody is old, dirty, sweaty, hippie-looking hillbilly guys going to their pickup truck might, and that's not always the case, but you have no idea. The case down in Florida a few years ago, I forget his name. Strega, was that his name? Similar situation. In this situation, you would be the man shot. But the reality was a car pulled into a parking lot in like a Florida convenience store, and they parked in the handicap spot. You watch the mister go into the store with his son. His wife's in the car. A couple minutes later, security footage shows another vehicle pull up near his, and the driver gets out and begins yelling at the driver of the car parked in the handicap spot. He's like the handicap parking police, saying you don't have handicap tags, and he's reading her the riot act. You don't hear it, but you see him waving his arms around. He's pissed. Husband comes out, 6'2", 3", black male, fit, walks up and just did the same thing you did. Hey man, back the up. Dude falls, hits the deck. Black gentleman standing there, like, all of a sudden guy pulls a pistol out, points it at him. Black gentleman takes a couple steps back. There's like 3 or 4 seconds, and he shoots him in the heart. He stumbles in and dies in the convenience store. So like that same scenario, you or I would have done the same thing. You come out, you're screaming at my woman, and I have no idea no normal man does that. But that's a pretty realistic. What happened with you? One of them guys could have been like, this guy's crazy.
Right.
Yeah.
Reality. So, you could easily dissect what I did as the wrong answer, that I escalated. And I can't tell people that if they were placed in the same situation as me, I can't tell them what to do. But I can tell them they better be prepared to do something.
Yeah. I think that's another truism of fighting. People that have never gotten their tooth broke or a bad bloody nose or their eye swollen shut or had to shoot somebody always are looking for some magic formula where they can get out of a scrap, win, and not get hurt. And it's like, well, you're probably going to get a little bit, unless you're ambushing people, but now you're a criminal.
Yeah. And, it's kind of scary that we do have this up and coming generation who they've not experienced throwing hands. So if they haven't gone to the local combatives gym and done a little bit of fighting and put hands on another man, and all they have is the gun, that's what they'll, in theory, that's what they would go to. And that's kind of scary. Like in that situation, the guy who shot the fella, right? Of course, parking in the handicap, it's wrong. It's not worth dying over.
Yeah.
I don't think, you know.
No, definitely
it's
not.
wrong. And you know, and that I would say, hey man, we would have less people doing silly stuff like parking in the handicap spots if more of us would kind of hold each other to a higher standard.
Yeah.
Okay. But at what point do we overstep our bounds and escalate a situation? So clearly, this guy escalated a situation. Husband, boyfriend comes out, gives a guy a little bit of love. He went straight to a pistol.
Mm-hmm.
Man,
Yeah, it's an interesting discussion because on one hand we say it's not worth it. Well, then nothing's worth it.
right.
And then on the other hand, everything's worth it because we live by this code. And if we just like, let everybody cross a line, then they all cross the line. So like that's like what the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists fought about. Are we intelligent enough to self-govern and live together, or are we animals that just bash each other's heads in? And some of us are animals.
Everything across the line, I mean, in American culture right now is so polarized that you're either this or you're that. There's nothing in the middle anymore, even though in real life, everything is gray. There's no black and white. Everything we do. And I'm a very principle-based person, right? I like to say that, you know, I have principles. And Lord knows I've bucked heads with command and leaders, and I've gotten myself in trouble over the years because I would just want to adhere to my principles. You know, a little idealistic to think that we can adhere to a principle 100%, right? There's no absolutes. And, you know, that kind of goes back to that saying, right? If you're not idealistic in your 20s, you don't have a heart. But if you're not realistic in your 40s, you don't have a brain. So
it's true.
And that's the luxury of youth, is that you truly believe or think that you can change the world, right? And let's face it, yeah, maybe you will grow up to be president of the United States and change the world. But statistically speaking, that's not a truth.
Yeah.
You know, you have to balance idealism and realism. You know, the Reverend Martin Luther King, in one of his lesser known speeches, talked about oughtness and isness, right? And oughtness is a idealistic concept of how things ought to be, how we think things should be, right? Things should be a utopia and human beings should be a certain way. And then isness is the reality of man. In other words, oughtness is the way things ought to be. Isness is the way things is. And to even get something close to the way we think it ought to be, we have to address it in reality, right? We have to define the reality of a thing.
What is.
And improve it. No matter how idealistic or realistic we approach it, right? We have to define what is really going on before we can improve it.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it's like that's what a good doctor does, a good mechanic does, a good shooting coach.
For sure.
So what are we working with here?
Right. I mean, we all know a bad doctor. We've had a bad doctor visit where you walked in, and before you could even tell him what was going on, he cut you off and wrote you a prescription.
Is this about the time I went to the dentist and had to hang my pants on the hook? Is it about that time?
Woo. Well, my girlfriend's a dentist.
Oh, is she?
Yeah. So if my dentist asked me to hang my pants on the hook, cool. Different situation than you and your dentist.
Yeah. How's that joke go? Doc, where do I hang my pants up? And he points right over on the hook by mine. That's
right. That is, man. You know, but a good MD talks to you about what's really going on. They get a full picture, and then they get blood work so they can see the chemistry that's going on. They want a full picture before they make a diagnosis. That's as much as I know about being an MD.
Yeah.
It's nothing. but you have to diagnose. And you're not going to get a proper diagnosis of anything if you can't see the whole picture, as much of the whole picture as you can gather, and that's an assessment.
That kind of goes back to what we've been talking about, this culture of communication through social media. It's, let me just blurt out my assessment. Let me blurt out my diagnoses without information. Or somebody commented today on a video I put up, and they said, just like this matter of fact statement, stay away from XYZ holster company. And it was like a safety related thing. And it was like, well, the holster's not unsafe. I commented like, I mean, I get what you're saying, bro, but like that product is just a thing. It's the guy that uses it and how they use it. And he's like, no, that thing is unsafe. Well, like, right. You know where the argument's going, but like, you're not thinking.
On that, right? I've tried all the Kydex holsters, the appendix Kydex holster. I've tried carrying a Glock 19 with a flashlight on it, appendix carry, and it's not comfortable.
Yeah.
And some people, of course, would address that with, well, being prepared doesn't mean being comfortable all the time. And of course, that usually comes from a young kid who has no clue the levels of discomfort I've experienced in my life.
Sure.
And I say, yeah, man, I get it. But for me, I'm going to carry my Glock 43 in this leather DeSantis holster that I've had since 1997.
I probably got the same one.
Yeah, with a little clip.
The little metal clip.
Right. Cost like $20.
Mm-hmm.
I found it in my team room doing my first inventory. Well, I've gone back to carrying that. I can put a Glock 43 in it. I can put pretty much any gun I want in it short of a 6-inch revolver, and carry it appendix or carry it 4 o'clock or whatever. I can take it out and put it in my laptop bag.
It's not very cool.
Well, but it's comfortable and it works.
Mm-hmm.
And leather can collapse, and when I holster my gun, discharge the weapon, pull the trigger, press the trigger, and I'm like, yep, you're right, man. That can happen. That can happen. But because I am a little older, there was a time in my life where everyone carried leather.
Mm-hmm.
It's the only thing we had until Blade Tech came onto the scene, or Safariland even before that. And I have not once ever personally witnessed someone ND a gun holstering in a leather holster. However, I have seen 4 people do it in Kydex holsters.
Yeah.
And in all 4 of those situations, it was negligent. It was 3, they put the trigger. And on the 4th one, the zipper on a jacket went in there. So anecdotally, if just from my experiences, I would come to the conclusion that Kydex holsters are more dangerous than leather holsters. That is not true. I know that not to be true. But if you look at my experiences, my personal experiences, things I've seen with my own eyes, I should be able to derive Kydex holsters are less safe than leather holsters. However, again, I know that not to be true. What I know to be true is, in every negligent discharge that I've ever witnessed, the one variable was the negligence of the person. It had nothing to do with the holster. The Sherpa holster, right? Everyone says that gun will ND, and no matter what, you could look at one and your gun goes off. Well, I think it was 2012. I went out to T1G and did a competition against like 12 other special operations guys. It was kind of a little bit of a reality show put on by Maxim magazine. And I'm like, man, this is going to be cool. Carl Erickson, 5th Group, former Sergeant Major.
Carl real well.
Carl's an amazing dude, man. One of my favorite people. He put the whole thing on. He designed the competition events, all that stuff, right? Well, Black Hawk was a sponsor of the event, and they gave us those Sherpa holsters. And we had all heard how bad they were. So me and a couple of other guys took the 1911s that they gave us to compete with and those holsters. We went out to the range, and we tried to do everything we had heard that causes those NDs, right? We tried to replicate it, and none of us could make it happen because all of us kept our finger off the trigger until we were ready to shoot.
Mm-hmm.
Assessing all of that information, whether it's a leather holster, that, like I said, the lowest common denominator in every single ND, holster-related ND I've ever seen, or every ND I have ever seen, it all goes back to this.
Right.
And it's attached to this.
I had a guy shoot himself, not in a class, but a guy that I've had training with. Alcohol was involved, disassembling a Glock, and shot himself. Well, Glocks, you got to pull the trigger to disassemble them. That's what somebody said about it. I'm like, dude had a round in the chamber pointed at his hand and he depressed the trigger. Like, I think the gun's fault. Yeah, but if he didn't have to depress the trigger to disassemble the gun, let me rephrase that. He pointed it at himself with a round in the chamber. Like, there's no other way to look at it but that. Right.
Lowest common denominator, you know? Mm-hmm. I mean, you know, I'm guessing it wasn't his first time disassembling a Glock.
Nope.
You know, if let's say, if it was his first time disassembling a Glock and no one had ever told him he had to pull the trigger to disassemble it, well, he probably would have sat there and messed with it, round in the chamber, because he don't know
this guy's been shooting 40 years too.
Right. Well, if you take someone who has never disassembled a Glock, who's never been told that you have to pull the trigger to take it apart, they don't pull the trigger on it. That exact same thing I was talking to you about, one of the SEALs had never touched a Glock before. Well, in one of the events, we had to disassemble and reassemble a Glock. This is some Carl stuff right here, right? Blindfolded, while hanging upside down in a traction device. You know, you hang from your ankle, the stretch board or whatever it's called. Yeah, so you had to disassemble the gun, put the parts on the ground underneath your head, reassemble the gun, and then get out of that chair and then go clear a house. The SEAL, who had never touched a Glock before, couldn't take the gun apart because he didn't know you had to pull the trigger. So was it the Glock's fault that he shot himself? No. It was his. Mm-hmm. So, like I said, man, I mean, you know as well as I do, man, freaking too many people are just so wrapped up around the focus is always on the piece of gear that I'm holding in my hand. And I care about human performance, and via human performance and human training develops performance, and performance enhances our capability. Mm-hmm. Chain of events. And, you know, you'll see guys, I mean, how many times have you gone to demonstrate something dry fire in front of a class, stuck the gun up, right? And then pulled it back down before you pulled the trigger and checked it one more time.
Sure.
Right. Well, it's those habits that we develop through training and repetition is why guys don't have the negligent discharges, right? And if you just do that and you have that personal responsibility, you can go through your entire life and never have a negligent discharge.
Yeah.
You know, some people say that there are two types of shooters: guys who've never had a negligent discharge, right? Or
those that are gonna. Yeah, right, those right. And those that are going to.
And those who are going to have one.
Yeah.
I don't know if I buy into that, because I know dudes who have been running and gunning for 40, 50 years and have never had one.
Yeah. Yeah, I've heard guys say that. I've heard some like big name guys say that as well. And it's the argument, I guess we're all human. We can make a mistake, but there's guys that flew airplanes for 50 years and never crashed one into the ground. And so fly long enough, you're going to crash an airplane. Well, maybe not.
Right. Right. And I think that's just that adherence to, you know, developing habits. Mm-hmm. When it comes to safety can never be a subconscious thing, right? Yeah. Safety has to remain a conscious effort at all times.
I will ask students when they have this discussion, maybe it's about muzzle discipline or trigger finger discipline or whatever it is. I say, when's the last time you just shoved your own finger up your ass? Just like randomly, just pulled your finger out, licked it, spit on it, and shoved it up your maybe on an elevator, maybe in the line at the bank, maybe at church, and you're like, you know, your family looks over and they're like, great, Dad just randomly shoved his finger up his ass. And it's funny, but people, of course, are like, well, never. I never done that. If it's women, I'll say poked your eye, you know, or when did you last time you just started jerking off on a bus, you know, like never. You choose to do those things.
Right.
And like you just let yourself get mindless. That's your point about the.
Well, and that's my thing, you know, you just said, use the word choice, right? Decisions and choices. Everything I've ever done in life, I made a decision to do it first, right? Whether it was getting better at a deadlift or getting my 2-mile run time down or whatever. I made a decision that I was going to do that. And people always talk about what's more important, motivation or discipline. And I'm like, that's a stupid argument. Who cares what's more important? Because it's going to vary between different people who are accomplish the same goal.
Sure.
The lowest common denominator, the commonality.
There's very disciplined people that are super unsuccessful, and very motivated people that are very unsuccessful.
Right. The answer is, when you're not motivated, you better be disciplined. And when you're not disciplined, you better be motivated. The best answer is you can have both at all times, but I don't know human beings like that. But ultimately, I don't care which one, right? To me, it's like a conversation we're going to have. The answer is, you make a decision to do something, and then you do the things that get you to your goal. And if you have no clue how to do what you want to do, you reach out to some SMEs, somebody who's done it before, and you ask them how they did it. And then you drive on from there. You know, there's been plenty of stuff I've done in my life outside of the military. In the military, I went to a training course to do something. There's been a lot of things. You know, when I got into ultra marathon, and man, longest run I had ever done before was a marathon at the end of an iron triathlon. You know, it's the longest run I'd ever done. I had done, 40-mile ruck march and, long ruck. So I had an idea of endurance for an ultra marathon, but I didn't just blindly go start running 200 miles every single day. That's not a formula for success. So I reached out, got into some communities. I mean, these days, right? Internet, man, everything that's not classified and secret, known to mankind, is available on our phones.
Yeah.
You know, the problem,
there's no excuse.
Right. Earlier you said, there's a lot of noise. Well, it's funny, since I have been in the physical community, been in different little communities, right? Now the gun community, 2A community, whatever you want to call it. The 2A community, by far, compared to the endurance athlete world, sports and athletics, military, strength and conditioning, that's an interesting one, right? Those communities, powerlifting or whatever, right? The more general and broad it is, the more noise there is, right? When you get into running, there's some very, people respect the best guys, right? And gals, right? People know who Courtney Dauwalter is because she was on Joe Rogan's podcast. She smoked the Moab 240 in 57 hours, course record by 11 hours.
Wow.
Right? Well, you know what? People wanted to know how she did it. No one disrespected a thing she did. Right? She's clearly the best right now. So let's but in the shooting world, you can have the best guy on the planet post a video, and some dude who's shot less than 1,000 rounds in his life can question him.
Yeah.
And it's just weird that these different communities, of all the ones that I've participated in, the 2A gun community is the one with the most noise.
Yeah.
If you want to become a power lifter, there are different camps, Elite FTS, 1020 Life, Brian Carroll, different elite guys who have, hands down, the strongest dude, David Hoff, those guys. And folks will look at what they did and emulate them without question. Now, don't get me wrong, right? Yeah, you got the different camps, and they'll argue, is 5x5, should I do RPS, or should I do? Ultimately, they're all doing about the same thing. They have a pathway to success. And in all those different communities that I have participated in, the shooting community, and especially the tactical community, it's the one with the most noise. Because in subset, if you go into the competitive world of shooting, it's much less noise. There are clearly defined pathways to success.
Targets and timers don't lie.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's kind of funny, watching these dynamics as I've participated in these different environments or communities, just watching these, different variables or dynamics at play. And then with me, I can't help but to try to analyze it and say, well, where does it come from? And I still don't have the answer to that question when it comes to the 2A.
I've talked about that with people before, and I've kind of just chalked it up to young men's egos, and because those that know don't waste the energy. I think it's mostly just young men's egos and people's inability to have, like you said earlier, you want to still talk to people. Me too. That's why I enjoy doing the podcast. Like I'd rather call you on the phone and chew the fat than text. Not that I can't text, and I do, but I want to hear vocal inflection. I want to hear you laugh. I want to hear what you're saying. See your eyes crinkle up when you smile.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I think that as far as the tactical self-defense type shooting stuff goes, there's no test. In competition, hits on paper and time. It's a test. It can be in the tactical world. It's a bunch of theories. We can only theorize because we're not able to test it on a daily basis. I can't go get in gunfights daily. I could do force on force and get kind of close. In long range shooting, you either hit it or you don't. There's your test. There's no theory. There's no theories, thoughts, or beliefs, or opinions. And I talk about that all the time, man. I'll find myself starting to type, well, I think. I cut that out. I've tried very, very hard to remove I think, I believe, and in my opinion from my vocabulary. Because to me, those terms are synonymous with, anytime I say I think or I believe, I could replace it with I'm not sure, but I'm going to tell you anyway. Right? I think something. I believe something. To me, that is just simply synonymous with not being certain. So what I try to do is not speak on things that I'm not certain or that I don't have experiences with. I don't want to theorize. I'm not going to speak to you on rocket propulsion. You know what I mean?
Sure.
I think I know how a rocket kind of works, right? I mean, I've shot some bottle rockets before, right?
Sure.
But I know that I'm not educated. I have no experiences in rocketry. So I don't want to talk.
That's an interesting thing about this community is that we almost allow, I think God made the open hand slap for this community of people. Like, because I would never go, I've run a couple miles in my life continuously. I've worked very hard and physically, I just don't like to run. So when I hear people running 240 miles, like our friend Johnny just ran the 100-miler you helped him get set up for, that's disgusting to me. I have zero interest in it. But
the funny thing is, man, me too. I hate running. I hated running every step of that race. I hated running all the.
But you wanted to do it. You wanted to do it.
Accomplish that task, but I do not enjoy running.
Well, my point is, I would not come into a forum of people like you or people that have done even a 10K. I've never even run a 10K. I would not go to that forum and be like, well, here's the best shoes or socks, or here's the best way to stretch, or here's the best meal plan before a race. I have no idea what I'm talking about.
Yeah, it's like, I have seen that before where, somebody who's really into CrossFit, and they run, the longest thing they've ever ran is a 5K, and they will suggest to someone who's going to go run a marathon what shoes to wear. And I'm like, shh.
Okay, so that is there.
Yeah, a little bit, not to the same scale. And no one will argue with it. Like if you see a comment like that in a forum, like no one likes it, no one responds to it. What's the answer, right? I wear Ultra shoes and have worn them for 6 years. Every single shoe I own is an Ultra. Every boot I own is an Ultra, except for I did just get a different type of boot. But anyway, it's a cold weather boot. Other than that, man, I've worn Ultras. Well, guess what? They fit me. They may not fit you.
Right.
John in Ultras. They fit him. He likes them. So the answer is, what shoe should I wear for a 50-mile race? The one that fits you.
Kind of like, what's the best gun?
Right.
Yeah.
You know? Right. And you
or
know,
sling or
yeah. 5-6 years ago, if you asked me what gun should I get, my answer would have been Glock. My experiences were pretty limited to 3 handguns: a Beretta, where I used it in my very first shooting package and never touched one after that, then the 1911, and then the Glock. Well, my experiences were the 1911 and 45 is not very awesome at actually stopping people. I have real life experiences with the 45 caliber. And then Glocks in 40 cal. And every time I needed my Glock in 40 cal, it worked really well. Based on those experiences, I would tell somebody, you should just get a Glock. That's where I was. It was just simple. Get a Glock. They always work. Well, 5-6 years ago, the Glock's trigger sucked because it ain't changed none. Right? Glock trigger since the 80s. It sucked. But relatively speaking, so did all the other striker fired guns. But in the last 5 years, we've seen the M&P 2.0, the 320s and X5s, the P10 series, all these guns were able to match Glock in reliability, and they have better triggers and better ergonomics. So one of the first people that convinced me that the Glock is not the right answer for everyone was my girlfriend. She had been shooting a Glock. She carried a Glock 43. She had a 19 that she could carry sometimes, and then she had a Glock 34 for competition. Well, now I have all those guns, and she has all M&Ps. She just couldn't work the Glock. She's got smaller hands. She couldn't make that Glock work great, but she was pretty good with it. Well, we were shooting with Brandon Wright, and she took his M&P, and immediately, her improvements were huge.
it's the way the mechanics of her hand fit with the gun.
Fit her hand. Well, if the reliability M&P matches the Glock now, and we have better ergonomics, better trigger, and she can shoot it better, yeah, man, my answer is going to be find the one that fits you best. Out of these reliable guns, if I have a high point and you like it the best, that doesn't mean it's the best gun, right? Sure. But you got to base it on some logic and reason. Right. Variable equation. Reliability, durability, capacity, threat assessment, vulnerability assessment. Are you carrying at night? Do you need a light? All those different things, have to come into play. So I've had in the last few months quite a few brand new shooters, first-time shooters. Some of them females, quite a few of them females. And what I do is I take all the different size guns I have. I take the 43, the Shield, then the 19 size guns, and then the full size guns, and I let them shoot them all. And whichever one they feel most comfortable with is the one I recommend. Whichever one they feel most comfortable with and shoot the best. And get a good result with, Right. It's pretty. Yeah. Just because, I have got to a point where I kind of assumed smaller hand females were going to like an M&P better. Nope. 105-pound young lady I was shooting with a couple weeks ago, for whatever reason, shot and preferred the Glock. I don't know why. I don't care why. I do something similar like that as well. Yeah. Just let them. Works for them. And I dig it. Because, that old saying, right? Beware the man that only owns one gun. You probably know how to use it. So that's what I always get to, man, and that goes back to the military. I didn't have choices of what I could carry. I was handed this equipment. I was just shooting this stuff. And let's face it, in 2001 to 2005, there was no internet tactical industry. Nope. We just ran what we were given. And some guys might have ran an LCAN, or some guys might have ran a 1-6 Night Force, or some guys might have ran an EOTech, or some guys, whatever. But that's all we had to choose from. And it wasn't about which was better. It was about, did you meet and exceed the standards? And that was all that anyone ever cared about. Was he able to perform? Not, you like the reticle and the EOTech better. It's a weird discussion. Yeah. There's so many weird things wrapped into it. Like,
Hollywood, right? So like you said, Rambo or John Wick. So there's like in video games, Lamb has got his own character in a freaking video game, right? Playing himself as a SF vet. Like, who'd have ever thought that? You know, like what? That like so we've got like that whole entertainment thing wrapped into it, and every boy likes a gun, and so there's like weird dynamics there where you wouldn't look at like nobody's got like patches of I'm looking at my bumper plates on the floor out there in the gym. Nobody's got patches of bumper plates or like
what
you know.
Back in the day, there was no idols. There was just there was that sergeant major you liked, and there was that sergeant major you hated. You know what I mean? And there was that team sergeant that you liked and would follow anywhere, and then there was that team sergeant down the hall that was a piece of shit. At no point did anybody go, "Hey, what does Team Sergeant Steve? What type of sling does he run? I'm going to use that." No, man, we just took the straps off of Alice packs and attached them to our guns. And then of course Sergeant Major Lamb, Kyle Lamb with Viking Tactics, he went and made millions off of a rucksack strap.
Yeah,
awesome. But you know what? If you give me a Blue Force Vickers sling, or you give me a VTAC sling, or any other new slings that are based off the rucksack strap design that VTAC, well, guess what? I'll attach it to my gun, I'll practice with it, and I'll get good with it.
Yeah.
Because that gave me,
Makes sense.
Yeah. And I think let's face it, right? As we get better at something, right? Let's say your first pistol is some piece of junk Ruger, but you get
I
good.
like Ruger.
When you're first learning, you're probably not going to know a big difference between the Ruger and a Glock.
Yeah.
So you evolve to where you can make better decisions about what will work for you better, you know? And I think that's part of the climb, the improvement, that new shooters today, they're expecting this information from these experienced guys, and then they get it and they take it to heart. No, man, it's going to change, right?
Yeah.
Like, I'd have been like, just get a Glock. Now I'm like, dude, check out this trigger on my bull gun. These 2011s are awesome.
Yeah.
They're fun to shoot. I can see that what I do at 10 meters with a Glock, I can do at 15 meters with a 2011. I can shoot the 2011s faster. The guns don't cycle any faster. The trigger moves less distance. But when I go back to work and I have to carry a Glock, I go back to shooting a Glock and shooting it the way I know I can shoot it. It's a deliberate thing. At this point, I carry a 2011 or a high capacity 1911, one of the bull guns, and I trust it. But the only reason I trusted it is because I've shot over 3,000 rounds through it. Mm-hmm. Dirty, nasty, all that stuff. Would I trust it in the desert? Well, I don't know because I haven't tested it.
Mm-hmm.
Before I say yes or no, I'm going to get it dirty with the type of environment that I'm going to be in and give it a test first. And, you just have to test and evaluate. Just because I say something, I don't think anyone should necessarily take it to heart. They should take it as a recommendation and then go test for themselves.
That's I think that's the challenge is there's so many voices, so many products, so many opinions, and I just want to be happy. I don't want to fight.
Right. I don't want to fight at all. I just want to go hunting, enjoy life.
Sew some stuff.
Yeah.
Hey, we've been talking like 2 hours, and I'm happy to keep talking, but I don't like to make the podcast go longer than 2 hours. I had a lot of insightful stuff. I give guys an opportunity. I say if you never get a chance to talk to or meet the people in person again in life that just listened and watched you, what would you leave them with? They only get to come your way this time.
Test, evaluate, verify. And that's in everything in life, right? Whether it's a relationship with a woman or with, a boyfriend, And that doesn't matter if you're a boy or a girl, right? It's 2020. Relationships, test, evaluate, verify. And it's a constant thing because everything is changing. You're constantly changing. If you're improving what worked last week, you might want to change something this week to continue that improvement. You take a 6-month break from whatever, running, lifting, business. You're probably going to need a re-ramp, right? Go back and restart. And ultimately, man, find out for yourself, and of course, I'm a big proponent, and I use that term, little hashtag that I put on all my posts, man. Go do something difficult. Pick something that is difficult for you. It could be a 5K. It could be climbing Everest. It could be going to ranger school. It could be, I don't know, freaking get a sewing machine and learn how to sew. It's something difficult, something stimulating, something that challenges you. And that is how we improve as human beings. Take challenges, man. Freaking don't be afraid to take a challenge and fail, right? I failed the Bigfoot 200 twice, or I didn't finish it twice. Once I failed it, went to the hospital, and once Melissa got hurt, and I stopped what I was doing to make sure she was okay. Well, hey, man, if I define myself because I didn't finish a race, well, then I wouldn't have gone and finished the Moab 240. And it doesn't matter, man. Difficult things are relative to the individual. Because of my experiences, what I think is difficult, right, might be completely unobtainable to someone else. So, while, I went and ran some ultras, a continuous 1-mile run might be that difficult thing for you.
Right, for that person where they're at.
Right. You always have to start where you're at. Where's a good place to begin? I get that a lot. What's a good place to start? Exactly
right
where.
Yeah, right here, man.
I want to get in shape before I go to the gym. No, man. You got to go to the gym to get in shape. So my thing is, hey, man, challenge. And people that I know, ladies, males, it doesn't matter. People that I know have done difficult things. They have had adversity. Mm-hmm. We live in such an amazing country with so many luxuries that these days folks aren't doing difficult things on grand scales.
I agree.
And if you want to make yourself better, pick something, take a challenge and go for it.
I like that.
Don't stop till you get it. Right?
How do people find you?
Yeah, man. Say that again.
How do people find you?
So, Tony_Cowden on Instagram. I don't have a funky call sign. Of course, the website is capableincorporated.com. That's where I post all my classes. I got a lot of articles over there and stuff that I wrote when I was a little more into writing. Yes, it's one of the longest domain names ever, but it is the whole word, Capable Incorporated. I answer all my DMs, man. I still answer every single DM I get on Instagram. And that's a lot.
Yeah.
But
it's good.
I said I was only on there to help people, to help them, to show them what I do and how I do it. And hopefully it helps them. So if I'm not answering my DMs, I feel like that would be a little hypocritical. So yeah, that's the 2 easiest ways to hit me up.
Cool. Well, I appreciate you taking the time, man. We covered a lot of ground. You guys listening, go follow him. Check out you guys have some courses that you teach as well. I know you were just down at our friend Shane and Carly's at Impact Shooting Center.
Yeah.
You've got some other things that we didn't even discuss with your physical feats that we could go into a whole nother discussion in the future and share some of your insights on that. I appreciate it, man. If you guys dug the podcast, share it on Facebook or whatever media platform that you're on. Leave a comment if you're on iTunes or Google Play about what you thought of this discussion and enjoy. Don't be dickheads. Mickey and Tony, Drew behind the editing desk. Thank you.
Thank you.
Visit our website, carrytrainer.com, for information about classes held throughout the U.S., Carry Trainer apparel, and upcoming projects. You can also email us at training@carrytrainer.com for information about setting up your own private course or speaking engagement. Training@carrytrainer.com or carrytrainer.com. little brother, what do you think of gunfighter gun oil?
I'm gonna have to show you.
Hey, Steve, what do you think of gunfighter gun oil?
Well, Mick,
Hey, Steve, what do you think of gunfighter gun oil?
well, Mick, I have to show you about that. Gunfighter lube. Baby, I had the gunfighter blues. But then I got me some gunfighter lube. Let me tell you about it. Made in the USA. Amazing lubricity. Amazing adhesion, baby. 100% synthetic. But it's gonna last you. Gunfighter gun oil, baby. Took away my gunfighter blues. I'm still working on it, but you know,
So you like the lube?
it's the best.